Hello, thank you for joining us today. We're really pleased to be here to focus on Echoworx authentication options. There's a whole lot of capability in this platform that we're excited to dive in a little bit today on a certain area of authentication. Very hot topic. We're asked about it all the time.
All the time.
All the time. And myself, let me introduce myself first. I'm Sarah Happe. I manage the client engagement department here at Echoworx, which really means an opportunity to work with our customers, our partners, large enterprise, get them everything they need to be successful on the Echoworx platform, onboardings, technical questionnaires, training, etc., you name it. We get to sort of serve as the bridge to enable our customers access to support, operations, development, product, right? I'm fortunate that I get to sort of work with everyone in the company and spend most of my day talking to our customers and partners.
Right. Yeah, very good. And I'm Chris Peel. I'm VP of Customer Engineering. I've been with Echoworx for 20 years now. I actually helped lead the original product development for the first 12 to 14 years, and then I transitioned more into customer engineering or customer interfacing side. So I'm sort of the tip of the spear in terms of working with our customers, understanding their needs and requirements. So I help position the product and the solution, but I have a secondary role where I feed back a lot of that conversation into the product development cycle, right? So what's the market trends? What are the pressure points that are happening out there? What are our customers saying, or at least our prospects saying in terms of their challenges, and how do we iterate on our product roadmap and on our future vision in terms of what we're doing? And so that puts a tight circle. I work a lot with Sarah. As I work with customers and bring them on, I pass through into the engagement team, who take that work we've done and sort of realize it in terms of
Exactly.
activation.
Yeah, we have some overlap there. We're both listening to what the customer needs,
Yeah.
helping them solve their problems,
Yeah.
and map that to the technical
Yeah.
features and functionality that we have.
Yeah, so a lot of customer-facing activity from an Echoworx perspective, but as well as a very technical side as well.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the nice things about talking about authentication is that it really highlights the value that Echoworx is adding to the customer's secure delivery, secure communications. It sets us apart from the competition most of the time.
Yeah, definitely.
And you'll see that today as we dive into a lot of different ways to access the service, receive your secure.
I mean, authentication by definition is really about security, but the nature of the conversations typically are about usability, right? So security and usability are often the tension points in a solution set, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, when someone's saying, how do we make this easier for people?
Yeah.
That is in a way asking about authentication. They just don't realize it. Right?
Yeah. So let's maybe we should move on and just talk a little bit about sort of Echoworx as platform, and we talk about how we approach that authentication.
Yeah, exactly. Because secure email is not just a turn it on or off. It's not one size fits all. Even within a particular company, there's going to be a lot of different requirements and different departments asking for different things.
Yeah.
So they want options, and that's what we're here to explain today.
What we have up here on the screen is sort of our ecosystem. It's like I like to call it. And so this is the breadth of the capability of the Echoworx platform. As a company, we're focused only on message encryption, and so what I like to say is that Echoworx's goal is to become that omni-channel for message encryption. And particularly, and what we see here is sort of the core functionality. We talk about direct, which is using sort of certificate-based encryption, push, where we're essentially pushing content directly in, and then pull, which is traditional portal. And where we see that we very much different than a lot of competitors in there's a lot of capability under the portal, which is probably the more ubiquitous way of delivering message encryption. And we have some authentication options also under push or direct delivery. But we're going to be spending a lot of our time talking about these authentication options and why having all these options are valuable in terms of meeting different requirements.
Yeah. So a little insight to what's in store for today. We're going to dive into 8 different styles of authentication. You can see along that bottom row of our delivery methods that there's, about like 12 boxes there. So obviously there's some overlap and some capabilities that are similar between the portal and pushing out, encrypted statements, etc. So what it's going to wrap up to is 8 very unique ways to, log in, to prove your identity and receive your secure content.
And some of them are about easing what we call reduction of friction or reducing friction of authentication. Again, creating more usability and more adoption, because it's important on adoption. And some of them are really more about creating more security, right? Where we're not so much trying to reduce friction, but we're trying to increase security.
Yep.
And so we'll see often in our customer conversation, there's that, I call it teeter-totter. Like usability can be increased, but there's often a compromise around security. Yep. And some customers use that, can adapt reactively in terms of the message classification, where they want to increase security or decrease or increase usability. And so the platform that we provide essentially allows that sort of dynamic configuration, either programmatically through policies or systematically in terms of initial configuration. And so when we talk about all these things, they're not mutually exclusive in the platform. They can be all employed simultaneously. Yep. or singularly. So let's get into them and let's talk about the benefits and what we can all do.
All right, number one, basic authentication. This really sets the stage of what we all expect or are most familiar with coming to any sort of website that has an account where you need to log in.
And this would be typical of any basic portal, right?
Sure, and you need to have this, right? It's ubiquitous. Everyone understands what is a password, and why do I have a password. So if you want basically the simplest, not necessarily the most secure, but the most prevalent way to authenticate into a portal is going to be you type your email address and the password that you've set up.
So from a user perspective, there would be, everybody logs into Gmail or Yahoo or whatever, or to their bank portal. So this would be, everybody can use it. So
everybody can use it. That's right. Yes. The recipient is creating their own password in this case. That's important because that's different than some of the other methods that we're going to talk about. And then,
then the basic things that you'd want to look at or layer on, or certainly we offer, is like, strong password controls, like making sure they're compliant with whatever, or at least uniformly compliant with corporate requirements.
Right. You don't want someone typing in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the platform is going to help with those rules, guiding them to creating something strong. Hopefully they're not using that in other systems too, right?
Yeah, password history would be another key thing that needs to be there, or possibly you want there as well. And then I think it's the other things that we, recovery processes, self-management are all also key to the platform there as well. So the customer can self-manage, self-recover. And then whether you want some kind of password control around that recovery, right? Is it good enough just to validate them with their email address? Yeah. Do we want things like security questions or alternate email address to be the verifications? So that's all pretty standard. And the other thing that I think that's become more vogue or normal now is, I call it security through transparency, is that whenever your account's being accessed by a device that's not known or logged in from a new location, is notification of that behavior, right? Because we see that, knowing or aware of the fact that your credit card has been charged or somebody's logged into your bank account alerts you to security issues. And that also needs to be part of a basic sort of authentication platform.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. The nice thing about basic authentication is that, when you come to that website, it's going to behave the same on any platform or device, right? You're always going to see that password prompt and you're going to type in your password.
And maybe also you want to talk a little about branding as well in terms of that?
Yeah, absolutely. The portal, since we're focusing on that, is going to have that authentic branding that matches the customer's corporate messaging, right? The way that they want the portal to be presented can match almost exactly to the website that they're already using or the other portals that they're already using to their customers. Right down to the URL. Yeah, good point. Yeah, they're going to come to this portal. It needs to look authentic. It needs to be from the customer. It's not an Echoworx portal, right?
Exactly.
So some of the challenges, what are the cons of just basic authentication, right? Why doesn't everyone just want that all the time?
And it's a good thing. I was just in conversation with a major financial company in the UK, and they were frustrated with their basic portal because the main thing, right? If they're receiving a communication once every 4 months, recipients often forgot their passwords, right? And so forgotten password is an issue, right? Like I can't remember how to log in. So having a reset functionality is great, but is there a better way to authenticate them in rather than forcing them password?
Because reality is people reuse the same passwords when they shouldn't for that reason. They don't want to forget it. What percentage of internet users today are really using a password manager? It should be high. You and I use one, But reality is that that's probably a small percentage of people using a password manager. So then they have to remember all these passwords. And everyone hates remembering
and
passwords.
it can be more challenging if you have strong password requirements. You know, they may not be able to read your password anyway, right? For obvious reasons. But when, you know, the other benefit though is because it is a portal, right? That things like brute force attack, so auto account locks when there's that's a benefit of keeping them within the portal, right? That authentication model there.
Yeah.
But you know, that's a basic portal, right? And I would think that most organizations or more solutions would have something like this. Certainly having options like 2FA, like TOTP and SMS. And just a little side story there, we implemented TOTP, which is the rotating codes initially, because it is the recommended security posture.
Absolutely. The Authenticator apps are, you know, you can get one anywhere, they're free, and they're very secure.
Yeah. But what we found from a customer user base, particularly in the financial space, is that their demographic can't use it. It's not a highly adopted outside of sort of, I'll say, sort of technical aware or something.
People,
So SMS, which is considered less secure in some ways from a security posture, is still the more dominant way for 2FA. So within, for instance, our platform, those can be optionally employed to let the recipient determine their level of trust and security, or they can be forced on. And the good thing is that you can give the recipient the option. You know, they may not know what, you know, an MFA for rotating codes is, but they know what an SMS is, and that's a better way. It's certainly better than emailing the password in the clear into their inbox. I see some solutions out there where the secondary factor is actually just emailing a code into my inbox, which is probably the lowest lowest resistance, but it's not a really secure way. And we've seen other solutions out there where their second factor of authentication is literally emailing the passcode to the inbox, and some CISOs would find that sort of unacceptable.
That would be unacceptable. That's right. Overall, though, basic authentication remains popular because it is like completely self-service, right? It's probably the fewest number of help desk calls when you just have basic authentication.
For sure.
Okay, moving on to number 2, we're going to go on a few different scenarios or ways to authenticate with a third party. So let's start out with talking about social connectors. What is a social connector?
So this is a good question. So just to step back a little bit, so social connectors were born out of this whole issue around, you know, I need to authenticate into a portal, but I already have an account and a password, right? And I may manage that quite well, such as my Google account or my Yahoo account, my Microsoft account. And so, you know, we're authenticating the user to log in with their email address and a password, but they have an account. So social connectors were born out of this concept of, and it's pretty also very ubiquitous. For instance, if you log into Spotify, you don't have to create an account at Spotify. You can log in with your Gmail account. And basically it's proxying the authentication to a third party. You're allowing Gmail or Yahoo or LinkedIn to verify you own that email address through that account. So and it's become very popular because essentially the recipient doesn't have to actually create another account.
I know, and it's fast, right? You just click that log in with Microsoft button. You're likely already logged in that browser because you have your email open. And so just with a couple of clicks, you're in. You didn't have to register.
So from an authentication perspective, it's probably, you know, it tips the scales really well on the usability scale, right? And a lot of organizations, a major Irish bank that we worked with, and a couple other, I think another major manufacturer in the automotive space, really love this from a user perspective. And we have the ability to curtail that authentication. We can allow Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, LinkedIn, or we can or Facebook, or we can narrow it down to just a few. So in the case of the automotive, they focused in on only O365 authentication because they were in a primarily B2B. So that's a key thing, and that can even be branded within our platform. So there's a one-time pop-up that says, hey, you know, secure messaging wants to access your email address, but that could be, hey, this is, you know, Echoworx, or this is manufacturer A, or this is financial company B. So again, that assurance, that branding, that trust has to be there through the whole thing. So it's a great thing. So basically, again, it is a simple system-to-system token. There's no data being transposed between the instance. It's just a verification process and a signed token that comes back.
Yeah. So when customers are saying, like, what's the easiest way to have people pick up their message, this will be at the top of the list, right? Turn on the social connectors, use OAuth, to let people log in with the accounts they already have.
So it removes the necessity for password management, password recovery. If they're transient customers, once every 4 months, they're not going to have issues about remembering their password.
Yeah.
I actually, even in many sites from a behavioral perspective, may have created an account, say, with Spotify, but I forgot my password long ago and have just resorted to the Google authentication process. And so I see that myself everywhere in terms of what I'm doing. So it's become a very trusted sort of way to get in, right?
Yep. But with everything, there's benefits and there's some challenges. So what are the challenges with the social connectors? Personally, I've worked with a couple of clients that really want to turn them on initially in the engagement. They're like, absolutely, we want this. The user experience team are saying those social connectors, we are putting those on the portal. We want it to be as seamless and easy to get in as possible. And then they start going through their own internal compliance and security reviews, and questions are asked about, well, like, how do we trust all these third parties? We're now having to like go and review the privacy policies and the security of each of those third parties before we're comfortable putting it on our portal.
Yeah. I mean, I think we certainly ran into that with this one financial institution, and I think what the challenge there is that the compliance officers team didn't understand the nature of the social connectors. They didn't understand what data was being exchanged, and so that was a problem there.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily have time to go and do the research. So to be safe, they'll just say no.
Yeah,
right?
And that's default behavior in security, right?
Yeah.
When in doubt, say no. So I mean, in that case, that was the one customer's concern. The more relevant concern, I think, I sort of acknowledge that, but that's just a knowledge gap, and how do you get the compliance team to understand the technology? But the other issue is some organizations don't want to advocate that trust out. They don't want to proxy that trust to, say, Google, right? And so what it is, it's just sort of like from a security posture. Well, I don't know if I trust Gmail to make sure that this is really chris@gmail.com, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that may relate actually more to the kind of data that's being exchanged, right? So some organizations may be more in the insurance space. If it's like an insurance policy or whatever, that seems fine. But if it's a high value asset trade, like maybe I'm a gold line customer at a particular bank, and they're authorizing large transactions, that maybe not be acceptable in terms of what's going on, and in which case more like a 2FA thing is there. So again, it's really about risk and usability, and risk and authentication. Like, what is the right answer for that, right?
Yeah.
But if we move on, so it's interesting. So then the next one is OpenID, and so when we were working with large financials, sort of enterprise things, and they love the idea of the social connectors, but they have authentication teams just worried about how to validate a customer and authenticate them in, and they often will have a solution that's already enterprise-wide.
Yeah, they already have a directory of all of their users. Their customers are already logging into their own like banking portal or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And they've implemented the 2FA and all the stuff that they need around assurances for that. And so that bears out a new standard, which OpenID is in some ways an iteration of OAuth, right? Which is where you proxy the authentication. And a lot of people use this stuff, single sign-on is another concept in that same area, like SAML. And OpenID is just basically builds on all those concepts, where rather than us calling a social connector Google to authenticate you, we're really calling an OpenID connector, which would be something like, and use a vendor's name like Okta, that essentially authenticates you. You log in maybe with your banking card or your banking ID or your user ID relevant to that entity, and we have one requirement, that it returns back the email address of the recipient, and then that just auto logs them in. So now you can basically, all the authentication requirements are built into your OpenID service,
and the customer has control,
and you have complete control.
Yeah.
And now you've got sort of this perfect world. But that's the benefit of all. They don't have to worry about managing multiple passwords, but there are challenges, right? So I'll kind of throw that back to you. What are some of the problems then with OpenID? Because we had a customer looking at this, and
we've helped a few customers set this up, and sometimes they do face a bit of a barrier where that customer directory has to have a verified email address as part of the user's account.
Yeah,
so
and that's more because we need that.
We do,
we're an email-centric system.
Because the email has been delivered with that address. We have to make sure the right person is coming in to pick it up.
Yeah.
We don't have other keys to use like a username
Yeah, we can't relate.
or an account number or
Yeah.
something, the
We-
key we have is an email
Yeah,
address.
that's all we know.
And so we need to pass that email address to the directory and make sure that they're certain the right person is logging in,
Yeah,
that it's
well,
been verified, and that it really
the
is their
authentication
email
call
address.
has to return the email address, right?
Yeah.
What they log in could be with anything, but they need to have an email address. But
Yeah.
yeah, that oddly enough, in this day and age, there are customers who don't have email addresses for the recipient.
Yeah.
Yet they sent them an email, but they can't
They weren't
they
mandatory,
can't relate
right?
they can't
Yeah.
relate the email to the customer identity.
Yeah.
That's the issue, right? The identity may be a banking ID, but they don't, and they know how to email them, but they don't know that that email address is related to the ID.
Yeah, exactly.
So you get in. So that's just a data modeling issue within the organization, and we've seen this oddly enough a few times.
So anyway, yeah, that's something we can talk to our customers about, help them through that investigation of whether their directory is a good fit or not. And then the only other challenge that I can think of about OpenID is just the integration time and resources, right? The customer is gonna find the right staff in their company that understands the directory, that knows how to integrate with it, and they have to spend a few days with Echoworx to get it connected.
I can see that. Yeah, it's a one time. I can see that. I mean, if it's set up in a way that its email address is already there, it may not be such a big deal.
But this is industry standard stuff, right? Yeah. For that reason, that you come to the portal and you can see the two choices.
Yes.
Do you want to log in with our bank?
Yes.
Or do you want to create a new account here in this portal? Yeah. And the recipient will know which one makes sense.
And that's exactly how we address it, right? So when they come to the portal, they don't have social connectors, but they can say log in with our bank or create your account.
Create an account.
And that's a way of we can solve that problem.
Okay, I think this is the final authentication via third party, number 4 on our list, and that is passwordless.
Yes.
Which is a little misleading at first. It sounds magic. So what is passwordless? What does that mean?
So passwordless actually is an interesting thing, and it's been sort of evolving over the last 6 years. So it's actually based off of a protocol called FIDO2, and in its infancy, I think we saw initially on all our mobile phones where, when we were logging into a portal or we were logging with an app, the app would pop up and let us use our fingerprint or your facial ID. And kind of what was going on there is it was creating a digitally signed token that was being stored in a secure module, a hardware secure module on your phone. And that was just a great user experience, right? And they wanted to move that into the browser. But it took, and over the last 4 or 5 years, what happened is there was extensions written into all the major browsers. And then by extension, those browsers then could reach into the hardware modules of the devices. And that's what FIDO2 kind of addressed. And what it means then is like an application could talk through the browser, from the browser to the device, to basically create a digitally signed token and store it locally. And that's what FIDO2 did. And so it's called FIDO2, and that was great. So now we had equivalency. So rather than us having to develop a mobile app to do biometric, that's the other term we'll hear, biometric authentication, and all that really meant was the biometric was used to access the token on the device and then present it back as a password, essentially. Yeah. Right? And that was great. And so FIDO2 really kind of democratized the ability to do this, meaning that any web app can have the same functionality as a mobile app. So it freed up a lot of developers or a lot of applications to now leverage biometrics. So that's all great. And about 1.5 years ago, all of a sudden, Google, Yahoo, and all the big majors says, you know what, we're going to make that a little easier. We own the browsers. Rather than just storing the key locally, we're going to put it into a secure store in the cloud. So that passkey, that token, if you will, isn't just stored on your device, it's stored under your account. And so that means if I log into my Edge browser to log in and I create a passkey to log into, say, the portal, now if I log into my Edge browser on my desktop, it's all part of my same account. That same passkey I created in one spot is now available to me in another spot. So passkeys kind of just took the local token and cloudified it. And that was the big thing. And so the way it's touted is passwordless, right? Because essentially I don't type my password.
Type your password.
What I'm doing is I'm providing a biometric authentication to access a token, which is essentially a digitally signed version of my password.
Which right away you can tell why that's more secure than basic authentication, right?
Yes.
You have to have the device in your presence to do that authentication.
Yeah. Or you've authenticated into your service to get at that passcode or that token, then to present that back in. Yeah. So it's called passwordless because essentially yeah, you're not using a password to log in, right? But you're using a biometric, which is essentially a long password to get at that token, to get at it, right? And so it holds this big promise for better usability, and I think it's sort of there. It's very popular. It's a you don't. It is arguably it replaces 2FA.
Yeah.
Arguably, it's much more seamless. Certainly on mobile and a desktop, it does work on a desktop. Or
Windows Hello.
Yep.
Right. You can use your Windows PIN to get into the Echoworx portal. I use that all the time. I love that.
Yeah. And you can always fall back to password if you need to. If you've lost your token, if you've lost your phone, that password still is there.
That's right. I wanted to mention how we incorporated this into the portal, right? It isn't something that the customer says, okay, I want all my users to do passwordless. It can't be turned on that way. It has to be an optional feature for those that have a device that's capable. So with the Echoworx portal, you will register and you will have a password because it's going to be sort of your backup. So it's going to be your plan B. Yeah. So you've got that plan B password that you could still use to log in anywhere that your device isn't available, or you're traveling, or it's just a different device than what you're used to. You've got a password if you need it. But for those that understand it and want to, enjoy the benefits of not having to put your password in all the time, I turn it on as soon as I see the option. I turn it on, and that's great for the customer as well, because it's still that same reliable self-service platform, right? The customer doesn't have to worry about a lot of extra help desk. They don't really have to train anyone on it, because it's an optional feature that's there for recipients who recognize it and say, oh, absolutely, I want to use passwordless. They know how to set it up, and away they go.
So one of the challenges, though, I would put out is that it is relatively new technology, and although, in that Goldilocks situation where I type my hello key and it works every time, sometimes it can be a little confusing. So I think from a demographic perspective, it's not necessarily used by everybody. I mean, there is a bit of sort of like what I just explained was a little below the layers, but it could be a little frustrating, I think, if I've logged in and created a passkey on my Edge browser on my desktop, but then I go to my phone and I'm using Safari, and all of a sudden there's no passkey there, and I don't understand why. But I don't understand that it's kind of ecosystem specific, right?
But for now, we're careful to always have on the login page an easy toggle. Would you like to log in with your password or switch to passwordless? So anyone who is confused should be able to find that easy way in.
Plan B.
Go to Plan B, All right, switching gears a little bit. Authentication method number 5, we refer to sometimes as linkless communication. So that's another sort of marketing. But it's quite true. It's quite true. So what is linkless communication? Another term we use quite often to describe that would be like a single sign-on integration, where the recipient doesn't need a link into the portal. They don't need a notification that says click here to pick up your message. Instead, their notification is going to tell them go back to our bank, or the customer's site that they already know the address of. They already know how to log into it. They have it bookmarked. So removing those links is desirable. A lot of times we've got customers asking, how do we do secure email without links?
And so some of the same challenges here with SSO as we have with OpenID, and I'll get to that in a second. So SSO is also a bit of a marketing term, and I don't mean to blame marketing, but that's the name we gave it, right? But because it's not single sign-on in what you might think, and it is really linkless. Actually, I would argue maybe be better communication. And you're right. What's the purpose of this is designed to do one thing and one thing only, is to remove links in the actual notifications for portal messages, right?
And remove registration.
And actually, it's too strong. A very good point. Right. No registration and no links. And so the notifications that a portal message arrive, you're right, simply instruct the recipient that, hey, there's a message waiting.
There is a new message.
Go to your existing portal. So it's kind of like, we don't want them to feel that this is phishing. We're never going to send you a link, but we may send you notification. So this is where you want a secure messaging platform, but you don't want to have to send links to them, and you don't want to build one yourself.
That's right.
So what they get then is a very simple way of integrating our portal into their existing portal. So just like When you think about OAuth, which we third-party authentication, or OpenID, where we go to an outside authentication, what we're saying is that we're going to allow the company or customer's portal to do the authentication.
Right.
So they log into that portal like they normally would, banking ID, password, whatever that is, and then with a bit of web services integration, basically you add a button that says click here, secure messaging, and it creates does a REST API call that creates a dynamic one-time use token that allows them that auto logs them into our portal. Yeah. So essentially, that's why we call it single sign-on in a way, because you're signing into your portal or the banking portal, and they auto log you into our portal without creating an identity. And so now all the onus of customer creation or customer authentication is within your control. Again, some of the same challenges though is that as with OpenID, you need to know the email address of the recipient.
Yes.
Right? And if you do send to somebody else who doesn't have an account, how do they create an account?
That's right. It's even more difficult in this case. The complexity of users who are registered already to the company portal and those who aren't, because you kind of need to send a link to people who can't do the single sign-on. So in that case, we've recommended or advised customers that they could, at the point of sending, add a header into a message
if they know
to instruct the Echoworx platform whether this should be a single sign-on case or not.
So back to it's exactly what you're saying, that because Echoworx has its own encryption policy engine, we can deal with messages in different ways. So all these methods aren't necessarily exclusive, but they can be all leveraged simultaneously. So it's conceivable that if you note in the messages header, as Sarah's indicated, we would write policies. This is an existing user, it's the linkless sort of communication setup, but this user is not a banking customer, so therefore we'll send them to, alternate portal A or BA.1, where that portal has a full self-registration process, right? And so, and ironically, they can be almost linked together. They can have, so in other words, if they do become a customer, they can then still log in with the SSO. So there's a lot of flexibility and malleability in terms of the development of our configuration of the product. So and we have those conversations. We're just piloting, actually we're doing a pilot with a big Brazilian organization right now around all this stuff, where they want to augment they have a platform for other communications and they need to do encrypted email, but they don't want to build it. So they want linkless communications. So we're piloting this with them right now for the exact same reasons. They want to leverage what they have.
Good.
Cool.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned this before, that the 5 lines of code sort of that they're going to put in their website, it's probably not quite 5 lines. But so that is, I would label as, a challenge to single sign-on, is that there is work for the customer who's going to actually modify their own portal.
But it does, again, if you're touching your corporate portal.
That's right. Yeah.
It's
just adds a layer to the project.
Yeah.
So, but worth it in the end. Yeah. Okay. Authentication method number 6, switching gears again. This is a cool topic. This is actually really hot. I'm dealing with lots of customers that are interested in the concept of a shared secret.
And so I just want to say, we're kind of shifting here. In the first sets of authentications that we're talking about, we're really talking about user authentication. We're talking about authenticating a user into the system. Yeah. And they have an inbox concept, right, where they're receiving messages. So in each one of those modes, users authenticated in.
They have an account.
And they have an account.
Yeah.
In the next set of authentications, we change the security posture differently, or to a different sort of model, where it's user message authentication. That means that we still have the same functionality in terms of reply and save and all that good stuff and all the branding that we've talked a bit about. And we have things like audit and recall capabilities. But now we're authenticating the user to the message. So it's a challenge response concept, right? And we have different ways of doing that. So back to you, sorry.
No, thanks. Yeah, so what does it mean to have shared secret? It really means that there is a passphrase, that is established at the time of sending. Could be by the actual sender, a person sitting down to compose that secure email. Could be an application that is auto-generating messages. And that password is set onto the email. And that's done through headers or keywords, etc. Lots of options, the Outlook add-in. But now that passphrase needs to be communicated out of band to the recipient, or the recipient needs to just know that passphrase.
So, I often use the term in sales. I say it's a shared knowledge, right? So like atypical, and one customer say, look, it could be and it's not the best example, could be the mobile number of the recipient, right? Could be the account number of the recipient.
Could be their account, could be their postal code, zip
Yeah,
code.
yeah. And that may not be unique enough, but that's an example of shared knowledge.
Yeah.
Or if they're on or if they're on the phone, actually, often it's set real time.
That's a great use case. The customer service rep already talking to the customer on the phone, very easy to establish a shared passphrase at that time, and then they know it. And it depends too on the type of information being sent. How secure or secret does that passphrase really need to be?
Yep. So now you get into, often security teams will get into data classifications and security models, like in which we may even dictate some of these different delivery modes based on that, right?
Yeah.
As well as the usability people have, different classifications or different requirements. Like I know, and it's in your last slide, but one of our customers particularly do that in a broker agent kind of situation, where they need to immediately deliver something to somebody on the phone, and they don't need a registration process. They don't want them to go to portal, but they need to secure it. And shared secret is most expedient. Yeah,
and this use case works great with both portal and PDF. push PDF delivery. It's actually even more popular with the push case. But very seamless for the portal too, where you get to the portal page, instead of seeing log in, you're seeing what is the shared.
So we talk some of the benefits we're talking about, shared secret messages are delivered right away, but really some of the things is like it's just a different security model. Every message can have a unique secure password. The recipient, only the recipient can get at it.
No registration. That's huge.
Registration. That's another reason why we talk about this. Portal has another advantage over PDF. Portal still has a brute force mitigation. And to be fair, if you send an encrypted PDF, so we're leveraging the standard PDF encryption technology that's built into the PDF standard, AES 256, but it does lend itself to brute force attack offline. That's right. So that's a downside.
There's no calling home for those PDF documents.
So again, that's a trade-off in usability and security, though there are people out there who would do this call home with JavaScript inside there, but then usability is drastically impacted because you're using web services call from a PDF, which means it won't work on mobile and stuff like that. The best way to mitigate that from a brute force is just to force strong passwords, right? So
something that the Outlook add-in can do, right? When the Outlook add-in is prompting a sender to put a shared passphrase on the message, there's password rules built in there to make sure that they're not just typing 123 123 or something. Exactly. All right, number 7, authentication with SMS. So we love talking about this. It's been in our platform for over a year now. So
I call this, when I'm certainly in a sales process, I'll call this registration list verification, because essentially we can send portal messages, which does not require users to register, which is often a requirement, but we still need verification. We need to verify the recipient's the right one. So sender set password kind of does that, but the problem, of course, like we just talked about, is like you have to have a shared secret.
Is work for the
and
sender.
work for the sender and possibly work for the recipient. So the way we've overcome this is like, if you include the mobile number of the recipient in the message, and we do that in a number of different ways, like that can be encoded, that the plugin will do it automatically. You can do it through application sending as well, but that means that a password or a message can be delivered to the portal. The recipient receives the notification, but we verify him to access that message through an SMS code, just like you would for MFA. And so it creates a sort of, again, we talk about that transient user. If they only get a message every 4 months, he never registers, and each time we verify him through his mobile number. So it's perfect, right?
It's easy for the recipient. It can be easy on the sending side, depending on if they have the phone numbers for the recipients or not, right? So if it's a application generated scenario again, where the application can reach into their customer database, easily pull the user's phone number, which often is verified and validated, sometimes even more than the email address.
And I would think, that was supported for sender set. I think application sending is one of the best, or the larger use case for this, right? Because you're just generating statements out. And if they're quarterly or annually, then again, that fits right into this whole transient sort of user experience, right? How do we get it to him, but not enforce on him a registration process for occasional communication?
That's right. So that phone number is added into the headers again of the message. Once it arrives securely to the Echoworx cloud, obviously it's stripped off at that point and saved, associated with that message. So when the recipient is coming to pick it up, they're following the link and then clicking the button to say, okay, send me that SMS now. So they're getting the text at the exact right moment as well. Like they're expecting it, they're holding their phone, there's the 6-digit code comes and they type it right in. So it's very fluid.
It's really slick. A lot of customers like that. We see certain market spaces kind of moving off of, or I think they're going to move off of sort of standard portal registration to SMS verification, simply for the reasons we talked about, right?
Yeah.
And it provides, it's a much more secure. It's an out-of-band verification. So it's really like an MFA kind of situation.
Yeah. And we were cognizant to sort of have a fallback method for these cases too, whereas if there is an email being sent maybe to a few people, you could have the phone numbers for 2 of them and not the phone number for the third. You still want to be able to deliver that email to the third person. So the platform will naturally fall back to a verification code, similar. It's still like a 6-digit code, but it's not. I didn't put it in the note. So that code, in that case, if we can't deliver it through SMS, we will send it back to the sender. And the sender can, give it out of band to the recipient. So at least this can work for all.
Yeah. So what we're referring to is there's a mode. Well, prior to SMS verification, we had verification code, which is essentially kind of like sender set, right? We've got a challenge response situation, but to take the onus off the sender of generating a password, the portal will generate a random password for you. So so in the case of SMS verification, if one of the recipients doesn't have a phone number, the portal will generate a random password, but it shares that password by sending it back to the sender.
Yeah.
So that sender then can communicate that out of band. So that still exists. So if you did have 3 recipients with only 2 mobile numbers, the third one would generate a password to the sender.
Yeah.
It's just a fallback, right? But again, you could also send them individually, and when you didn't have a verification code or a mobile number, you could fall back to regular portal delivery. Again, that flexibility to decide what to do in what situations can be programmatically encased in our policies to replicate your business requirements.
Yeah, exactly. And we put the effort too to make sure that this delivery method can be supported with the Outlook add-in, so that when it isn't the kind of slick application case, there's going to be times where senders want to use this as well, and we want to give them a way to easily add the phone number onto the message, so there can be a nice pop-up in the add-in, with the list of recipients, and you can even fetch the phone numbers right out of your address book.
If you have them, they'll find them, right? And then you just fill in what you don't know. Yeah, it's a great use case. It's very slick. Actually, it was born out of conversations with one of the major British bank, UK banks that we've been talking to, and they see this as the way that they want to go.
Yeah.
Cool.
Finally, the 8th method in our discussion today of authentication. URL-based authentication. What does that mean?
I call this TLS a web-based TLS.
Web-based TLS, that's funny. We also refer to it a lot as no authentication at all. Really, because we're delivering the notification, we're delivering a link.
So we put the message in the portal.
Yeah.
And we send a notification, but the notification directly opens up the message.
Right. Yeah.
And the question is, why would you do that?
Why would you do that?
There's
a lot of reasons.
Customers ask us to. Yeah, but I mean, the initial use case, oddly enough, was born out of land title in the U.S., where right back to data classifications, where they wanted an easy user experience to deliver a message, but they didn't want the content in the inbox of the recipient, because they didn't want Gmail and Yahoo scanning it and then, advertising off of that. Yep. So they wanted this sort of seamless kind of thing. And oddly enough, it's become a very popular use case for slightly different reasons. One reason too is that it's also a good use case for inbound communication.
Yeah.
So if I have an ad hoc requirement, if I'm onboarding a customer and I need them to send me a copy of their driver's license or something, if I send them a no authentication link saying, and they're obviously expecting it, and it pops up, we secure the full inbound communication.
That's right. Now they're in the portal, they can compose a secure email, they can upload all their sensitive documents and send it back to you. Yeah. So you've kind of an easy way to initiate inbound secure communication.
So it's providing, like you said, it's not visible to the recipient's provider, no one's scanning it. So those are some of the big advantages.
It comes down to as well as what kind of information is being sent,
Yeah.
right? Like we have a pharmaceutical company that uses this method all the time.
Okay, yeah.
They're creating like programs for different drug trials.
Right.
They want the right branding on those messages. They've got sort of a closed group of people that are communicating
yeah.
about
Yep.
a new drug or a trial or testing, and to keep it audited and all within that portal is a great experience for everyone.
So they get the audit functionality. Like, so our portal provides audit and recall functionality. So they're getting all that benefit without actually sending it in the clear.
Right. But they would have, I mean, the information itself would have been okay over TLS, or it would have been, it doesn't need to have everyone logging in with these strong passwords to read it. It's more about sharing the information with that branding and auditing.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So often we built. I remember when the requirement came up, I had a hard time understanding why we wanted to do this, but it's become a niche functionality that's actually used far more than I thought.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So a challenge, I think it's pretty obvious what the challenge with this delivery method is that anyone can click the link. If somebody has hijacked your email or gotten into your email, they can follow that link and read the message. So
maybe not the best option for your high classified stuff, but again.
So, well, let's wrap up with a couple of insights, or I thought it would be fun to feature a customer that is using a lot of these different authentication methods kind of all at once, so to speak, like, and talk about how they're doing that.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of alluded to them a little bit. So one of our main insurance company, one of our largest insurance companies, their compliance, their CISO department did a full review in terms of security and what they want to do. And they realized that data, like we've been talking about, different data has different data classifications and has different acceptable delivery mechanisms. And so they embarked on a process of educating their end users on security and what's the appropriate thing. So within their plugin, they've leveraged the extensibility that we have quite well. So based on certain data classifications, they may use TLS with fallback to portal. And I'd say a large portion of that is kind of how they communicate, because as an insurance company, a lot of what they're communicating needs to be protected in delivery because it's like a policy update.
Yeah.
But it's not so sensitive that if somebody read it, that's going to be a problem.
They need to guarantee secure delivery through any of the acceptable means.
Yeah.
But they're a great use case for the Outlook add-in, the Echoworx add-in, and the blue padlock, and the options that they can offer under that blue padlock. They're educating their staff. When is the right time to put a shared secret on the message? Click that option. Well, when is it not quite as sensitive, and you want to leverage TLS with fallback?
And I think they've even done that because the plugin too is configurable, and the wording there even describes sort of why you do A versus B versus C. Yeah. And so in the second case, so TLS PDF, where it's acceptable to deliver it through PDF, right? Because again, PDF has, the pluses and minuses we talked between portal, and that's okay. Sometimes they even have forced PDF because there's a necessity to deliver it directly. That was the broker agent conversation we had like 10 minutes ago. Yeah. And so shared passphrase is part of that as well. And they even configure it slightly differently. They do application sending as well, and they eliminate all the encrypt notifications that we send back to the senders. So they extensively use sort of almost all the delivery mechanisms. I think the only thing they don't use is PGP and SMIME, which is the only thing, right? Yeah. So it's quite interesting. But I see the roadmap, right? So where are we going? We talked a bit about demographics, like we talked about SMS. So when we actually, just a little story about this, when we first built 2FA, we focused in on TOTP, which is the time-based one-time password, so the rotating codes. And as we brought that to the market, what we found was that was the right security posture, that's the recommendation, but from our customer base, our demographics said, most customers can't figure that out. There's just a few propeller heads here in black shirts that probably can do it.
We can't force it when it's only an authenticator app. We want to force it with both SMS.
What we heard back quite well, it's like SMS is the only thing that they can do from a demographic. It's the most ubiquitous. That's the way it's going to go. So we then moved into SMS functionality, and we see that perforating through the product, right? We have 2FA SMS. We're going to password recovery with SMS. We have authentication with SMS because it is just more ubiquitous. But how do we make that more secure? So we've been working in sort of South America and some other marketplaces, and the demographic is changing. Maybe not this year, but WhatsApp seems to be the right way to go, right? It's an extension of SMS in the context of it's a mobile-centric application, right? and it's very easy for us to pivot into that area. And it offers some advantages that we don't see with SMS, right? It's end-to-end encryption, and we see that, what's the market? The addressable marketplace is 1 billion end recipients using WhatsApp.
Amazing.
And we know that WhatsApp, for instance, is building business apps. We know that businesses are using WhatsApp as a communication. So we see WhatsApp as an emerging channel in that ecosystem for delivery. So we see that we're going to be adding in, so 2FA and linkless, or 2FA or SMS verification will now support WhatsApp. That's where we're adding, and that's our first foray into that. But we can see a time where WhatsApp will be its own channel completely, right? Where not just the links or the verification codes, but actually the whole messaging.
So North America is a little bit behind the rest of the world on WhatsApp usage in business.
Yeah, I would say that most of this demand is coming out of, certainly in South America. And it goes to regional challenges, right? When I was talking with somebody in the Malaysia area, we're working with a customer there, and everybody on average in Malaysia, there's 2.5 phones per person there, but there's less than 1 laptop for 1,000 person.
Wow.
And so mobile and WhatsApp is the dominant communication platform there. In South America, WhatsApp is, from the Brazilian company we're working with, I know WhatsApp is a dominant communication platform, and mobile numbers are probably more prevalent than email addresses.
Yeah.
So as we expand more into these other markets, these sort of non-North American EU markets, mobile first is really probably the more critical thing. Back to what we talked about, maybe more financial institutions have a valid mobile number for a recipient. So rather than an email address. So we see the platform evolving into that as well in terms of supporting what I call a mobile first delivery concept.
Very cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're going. I mean, that's not tomorrow, but that's certainly where we see ourselves in the near future.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for staying with us and learning all about authentication in Echoworx. Chris and I would love to hear from you. We would love to talk further about your specific use cases. So absolutely reach out and we can continue the discussion.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.